So why did we have to waste our time with those dumb robberies?
Never question my motives.
Before Julie Newmar became the unforgettable Catwoman, she was turning heads in a role that few people talk about today. Long before the catsuit made her a television legend, Newmar appeared in a production that pushed boundaries, sparked whispers, and hinted at the fearless performer she would become. It wasn't the innocent Hollywood beginning many fans imagine, and it revealed a side of her ambition that set her apart from the very start. So what was Julie Newmar's first show, and why has it remained one of the most overlooked chapters of her career? Join us as we uncover the surprising story that launched an icon. The untold story of Julie Newmar before she became Catwoman. Long before Julie Newmar became one of television's most unforgettable stars, there were already signs that she wasn't destined for an ordinary life. The confidence, elegance, and magnetic presence that would later make millions stop and stare didn't suddenly appear when she slipped into Catwoman's famous catsuit. They had been quietly taking shape for years, shaped by a childhood that blended discipline, creativity, and an unusual drive to stand out. Looking back, it's almost impossible not to notice the clues. Even as a little girl growing up in Los Angeles, Julie seemed to be preparing for a future that was far bigger than anyone around her could have imagined. Born on August 16, 1933, in Los Angeles, Julie was the oldest of 3 children in the Newmar family. Her parents came from very different worlds, and together they created a home where ambition wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. Her father, Don Newmar, had once played professional football during the early years of the National Football League before becoming the head of the physical education department at Los Angeles City College. He believed in discipline, commitment, and pushing yourself to achieve more. Her mother, Helene, was every bit as ambitious, but her talents took a different direction. A gifted fashion designer who worked under the professional name Shalene, she had an eye for beauty, style, and presentation. Later in life, she successfully reinvented herself as a real estate investor, proving that taking risks and embracing change were simply part of who she was. Between her father's athletic determination and her mother's artistic instincts, Julie grew up surrounded by 2 very different examples of success, both of which would quietly shape the woman she would become. The family's faith also played a significant role in her upbringing. Raised as a Christian Scientist, Julie would later reflect on those early years with surprising appreciation. Rather than dismissing her childhood beliefs, she credited them with giving her a strong mental foundation, once saying that the principles she learned provided an excellent basis for anyone hoping to build a powerful life, whether in show business or anywhere else. It was a perspective that hinted at the remarkable confidence she would carry throughout her career. Julie also shared her childhood with 2 younger brothers, Peter Bruce and John. While Peter's life was tragically cut short in a skiing accident years later, John would go on to build an impressive career of his own as a writer, epidemiologist, and winemaker. Achievement seemed to run throughout the family, but Julie's path would take her somewhere entirely different. That path began surprisingly early. While most children her age were still discovering hobbies, Julie had already found something that seemed to fit her perfectly: dance. She threw herself into ballet with extraordinary dedication, displaying a level of discipline and natural ability that quickly separated her from her peers. Hours of practice became part of her daily routine, and every performance sharpened the poise and graceful control that would later become trademarks of her screen presence. Her talent developed so rapidly that by just 15 years old, she was performing as a prima ballerina with the Los Angeles Opera. It was an extraordinary achievement for someone so young, placing her on stage alongside seasoned professionals while most teenagers were still sitting in high school classrooms. At the time, It may have seemed like ballet would define her future, but in reality, the stage was only preparing her for an even bigger spotlight, one that would soon introduce Julie Newmar to the entire world. The forgotten roles that made Julie Newmar a star. Although ballet had given Julie Newmar grace and discipline, it wasn't enough to satisfy her growing ambition. Hollywood was only a short drive away, and like countless young performers before her, she was drawn toward the bright lights of the movie studios. But unlike the glamorous stories people often imagine, her journey didn't begin with starring roles or overnight success. It began in the background, where audiences barely noticed her, even though she was already impossible to ignore. Fresh out of her teenage years, Julie found work wherever she could. Sometimes she was a dancer. Sometimes she appeared so briefly that her name never even appeared in the credits. She blended into lavish musical productions, historical epics, and colorful fantasy films, often wearing elaborate costumes that made her look more like a living work of art than a traditional actress. In one memorable early role, her entire body was covered in shimmering gold paint, transforming her into an unforgettable visual even though she barely spoke a word. It was the kind of part many aspiring actresses would have dismissed, but Julie approached every opportunity as another chance to be seen. At the same time, she wasn't simply waiting for someone else to shape her career. While still only 19, she was already working behind the scenes as both a dancer and choreographer for Universal Studios. That experience gave her a unique understanding of how productions came together. Instead of seeing only the spotlight, she learned how every rehearsal, every camera angle, and every movement contributed to creating movie magic. Those lessons would prove invaluable later when she became the center of attention herself. Gradually, the tiny roles started becoming bigger ones. Casting directors began recognizing that Julie possessed something far more valuable than striking looks. She had remarkable physical control, confidence, and a magnetic presence that made audiences notice her even when she wasn't speaking. Before long, she landed one of her first significant screen roles in 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. It wasn't the leading part, but it placed her in one of Hollywood's most beloved musicals and introduced her to a much wider audience. For the first time, people were beginning to remember her name instead of simply noticing her face. Still, the biggest turning point wasn't happening in Hollywood at all. It was unfolding nearly 3,000 miles away in New York City. In 1955, Julie stepped onto a Broadway stage for the very first time, and everything about her career began to change. Live theater demanded something completely different from film. There were no second takes, no clever camera angles, and no editing room to fix mistakes. Every performance depended entirely on the actor standing under the lights. Julie embraced that challenge. Then came the role that audiences simply couldn't stop talking about. In the Broadway musical Lil Abner, Julie originated the character of Stupefying Jones. Technically, it was only a brief appearance. She had very few lines and surprisingly little stage time. But none of that mattered. The moment she walked on stage, the audience's attention belonged entirely to her. The character's overwhelming beauty was literally written into the story, leaving everyone around her speechless. It lasted only a few minutes, yet those few minutes became one of the most memorable parts of the entire production. The role became such a sensation that Julie remained with the show throughout its successful Broadway run before appearing in the film adaptation as well. Suddenly, she wasn't just another dancer trying to survive in Hollywood. She had become someone producers actively wanted. That success opened the door to even greater opportunities. Soon afterward, she starred in the Broadway comedy The Marriage Go-Round, where her performance earned some of the strongest reviews of her career. The role showcased more than her striking appearance. It revealed impeccable comic timing, confidence, and charisma, qualities that critics felt had been overlooked for years. In 1959, those talents were officially recognized when she won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in a Play. It was a remarkable achievement that proved she was far more than a beautiful face. Of course, like every performer, Julie also experienced disappointments. Not every production became a hit, and not every role lasted as long as expected. Some projects closed almost immediately, while others ended before audiences ever had the chance to see them. Yet those setbacks never seemed to slow her down. She simply moved on to the next opportunity, carrying with her the resilience that had defined her career from the very beginning. By the early 1960s, Julie Newmar had built an impressive resume across film, television, and Broadway. But despite all those accomplishments, the role that would make her a household name still hadn't arrived. Ironically, it wouldn't be a dramatic performance or an award-winning stage role that changed everything. Instead, it would come from a comic book villain dressed in black, a character that Julie herself would transform into one of television's most unforgettable icons. The surprising truth behind Julie Newmar's Catwoman. By the time Julie Newmar was offered the role that would define her career, she had already spent years proving herself on Broadway, in Hollywood musicals, and on television. Yet none of those accomplishments would come close to what happened next. One sleek black catsuit, one mischievous smile, and a handful of appearances would permanently change how audiences remembered her. Ironically, the role that made Julie Newmar immortal almost never existed in the form we know today. When television executives first began searching for a comic book hero to adapt in the mid-1960s, Batman wasn't even their first choice. ABC initially explored several other popular characters, including Superman and Dick Tracy. The problem was simple: the television rights weren't available. Batman, however, was. What started as a backup plan would soon become one of the biggest surprises in television history. The network handed the project to veteran producer William Dozier, who accepted the assignment despite knowing almost nothing about Batman. In fact, he admitted he had never even read a Batman comic before taking the job. Instead of treating the material like a serious crime drama, Dozier saw something entirely different. He recognized that if the series embraced its own absurdity instead of running from it, audiences might have a lot more fun. Even then, nobody expected what came next. Producing Batman was an expensive gamble. The elaborate gadgets, colorful costumes, custom vehicles, and comic book-style sets required far more money than an average television show. To help cover those costs, Dozier originally planned to release a feature film before the series ever reached television. The movie would introduce viewers to Batman's world while allowing expensive footage of the Batmobile, Batboat, Batcopter, and other elaborate equipment to be reused throughout the series. It sounded like a smart strategy, but television had other plans. ABC suddenly found itself struggling with disappointing ratings across several primetime shows. Desperate for something that could quickly attract viewers, the network abandoned the movie-first approach and rushed Batman into production. Instead of waiting until the fall television season, the series debuted as a mid-season replacement in January 1966. Few people inside the network believed they were launching a hit. In fact, early test screenings were disastrous. When preview audiences watched the first episodes, the responses ranked among the worst ABC had ever received. Executives feared they had produced an expensive disaster. Viewers couldn't decide whether the show was supposed to be an action series or a comedy, leaving many completely confused. Fortunately for everyone involved, the general public understood the joke. Audiences immediately embraced the show's colorful villains, exaggerated fight scenes, outrageous gadgets, and deliberately over-the-top performances. The famous "pow" and "bam" graphics became instant pop culture sensations, while Batman transformed into one of the hottest shows on television almost overnight. That success created the perfect stage for one unforgettable villain. When Julie Newmar first stepped into the role of Catwoman, she didn't simply play the character, she reinvented her. Catwoman had appeared in the comics wearing a relatively simple outfit, complete with a cat mask. Julie believed the costume could be far more elegant and far more seductive. Working with the production team, she made one important suggestion that completely changed the character's appearance. Instead of placing Catwoman's belt around the waist, Julie lowered it onto her hips, instantly emphasizing the character's famous hourglass silhouette. It was a surprisingly small adjustment, but visually, it transformed the costume into one of television's most recognizable designs. That very costume would later find its way into the Smithsonian Institution, becoming a piece of American television history. Of course, Julie wasn't the only actor putting extraordinary thought into her performance. The villains surrounding Batman became legendary because each actor brought something unique to the screen. Burgess Meredith, who portrayed the Penguin, was so committed to creating the character's unforgettable raspy squawk that he reportedly began smoking again after nearly 20 years simply to roughen his voice. Combined with the bulky padding hidden beneath his costume, which naturally forced him into the Penguin's signature waddle, Meredith accidentally created a version of the villain that would influence portrayals for decades. Then there was Cesar Romero's Joker. One of the character's most recognizable traits, his unsettling, high-pitched laugh, was never part of the original script. While waiting to audition, Romero glanced at sketches of the Joker's colorful costume and burst into spontaneous laughter. The producers heard it, loved it, and immediately decided that bizarre cackle should become part of the character forever. Even the actors playing the heroes weren't immune from the chaos behind the scenes. Burt Ward, who portrayed Robin, later revealed that filming Batman was often surprisingly dangerous. Explosions frequently went off far closer than they should have, leaving him with burns and cuts during action scenes. On another occasion, he was thrown from the Batmobile during a high-speed turn, suffering serious injuries. Despite the show's playful tone, making it was anything but carefree. Julie herself almost never became Catwoman. Oddly enough, one of the biggest reasons she accepted the role had nothing to do with producers or studio executives. According to Julie, it was actually encouragement from her brother's friends that convinced her to take the part. They believed Catwoman had enormous potential and urged her not to turn it down. They couldn't have been more right. Almost immediately, Julie's chemistry with Adam West became one of the show's biggest attractions. Their playful flirtation gave Batman something it rarely had with other villains: genuine romantic tension. Catwoman wasn't simply trying to defeat Batman. She constantly tempted him, challenged him, and blurred the line between enemy and possible love interest. That dynamic became one of the defining elements of the series. Ironically, Julie didn't appear in every season. When the 1966 Batman feature film was produced, actress Lee Merriweather stepped into the role because Julie had already committed to another project, one that ultimately never happened. Later, during the television series' final season, Julie was unavailable again because she was filming McKenna's Gold. That opened the door for the incomparable Eartha Kitt to bring her own interpretation to Catwoman. Although each actress offered something different, Many fans still consider Julie's portrayal the definitive version. The show's popularity also transformed comic books themselves. Before the television series, Catwoman's appearance in the comics looked noticeably different. But after audiences fell in love with Julie's sleek black catsuit and glamorous gold accessories, comic artists gradually adopted elements of the television design. It was a rare example of television influencing comic books, rather than the other way around. Batman was also quietly making television history in other ways. Long before cinematic universes became fashionable, the series experimented with crossover episodes, bringing Green Hornet and his sidekick Kato into Gotham. The appearance introduced audiences to the idea that heroes from different stories could share the same universe, something modern superhero franchises would later turn into a billion-dollar formula. Despite its enormous popularity, however, Batman wasn't universally loved. Many lifelong comic readers believed the show's campy humor made Batman impossible to take seriously. Their criticism eventually pushed DC Comics toward much darker storytelling after the television series ended. Ironically, the very success that made Batman a worldwide sensation also inspired creators to completely reinvent him. The series also corrected one of comic history's greatest oversights, although that recognition came much later. For years, Bob Kane alone received public credit for creating Batman, while co-creator Bill Finger remained largely forgotten. The 1960s television series was one of the few adaptations to acknowledge Finger's contribution, and decades later, his family successfully fought to ensure his name appeared alongside Kane on future Batman projects. Looking back, it's remarkable how many accidents, last-minute decisions, and unexpected risks shaped the series that would forever change Julie Newmar's life. A show that almost wasn't made, a network that expected failure, a producer unfamiliar with the source material, and a role Julie nearly declined all came together to create one of television's most enduring cultural phenomena. For Julie Newmar, Catwoman wasn't simply another acting job. It became the role against which every other performance would be measured. Decades later, countless actresses have worn the catsuit. But whenever fans discuss the most iconic Catwoman of them all, one name still rises effortlessly above the rest. And that says everything about the lasting impression Julie left on Gotham and on television history itself. The last surviving stars of the original Batman TV series. Nearly 6 decades have passed since Batman first exploded onto television screens, and time has inevitably changed the cast that made the series so unforgettable. Many of the stars who brought Gotham City to life have sadly passed away, including Adam West, whose charming portrayal of Batman made him a television icon until his death in 2017. Over the years, fans have also said goodbye to beloved cast members such as Burgess Meredith, whose unforgettable Penguin stole every scene he appeared in, Cesar Romero's wildly entertaining Joker, Alan Napier's dignified Alfred, Neil Hamilton's dependable Commissioner Gordon, and Yvonne Craig, whose Batgirl inspired an entire generation of young viewers. Today, only a handful of the show's major stars are still with us, serving as living reminders of one of television's most influential superhero series. Their lives have taken very different paths since the cameras stopped rolling, but each remains forever connected to Gotham City. Perhaps the least surprising survivor is Burt Ward, the actor who brought Robin to life. Although audiences saw him as Batman's teenage sidekick, Ward was actually in his early 20s when filming began. That slight age difference ended up working in the show's favor, allowing him to match Adam West's perfectly timed comedic delivery while still convincing audiences that he was the eager boy wonder. Behind the colorful costume, however, Ward paid a heavy price for his role. He performed many of his own stunts and suffered burns, broken bones, and numerous injuries throughout the series. Yet those painful experiences never diminished his affection for the character. Instead, he embraced Robin for the rest of his career. Long after the original series ended, Ward repeatedly returned to the Batman universe. He voiced Robin in animated projects, made appearances across several DC productions, and, in 2016 and 2017, reunited with Adam West to voice the dynamic duo once again in the animated films Batman: Return of the Caped Crusaders and Batman vs. Two-Face. Those films became an emotional reunion for longtime fans, giving the original Batman and Robin one final adventure together. Now 81 years old, Burt Ward remains active on the convention circuit and continues celebrating the series that made him famous. Of course, no discussion of the surviving cast would be complete without Julie Newmar. While she enjoyed a successful career before Batman, Catwoman remains the role audiences instantly associate with her. Her flirtatious performance, effortless confidence, and unforgettable chemistry with Adam West elevated the character into one of television's greatest villains. Decades later, many fans still consider her the definitive Catwoman. Unlike many television stars who disappeared after their signature role, Julie continued acting for years. She appeared in numerous television series, films, and stage productions, while also lending her voice to animated Batman projects. In a fitting, full-circle moment, she returned as Catwoman alongside Adam West and Burt Ward in the animated reunion films released in 2016 and 2017. It was the last time audiences heard her portray the character that had defined her career. Since then, Julie has largely stepped away from acting and embraced a quieter life away from Hollywood. Even so, she still makes occasional appearances at fan conventions where admirers from multiple generations line up for the chance to meet the woman who helped define Catwoman for an entire era. At 92 years old, she remains one of the last surviving symbols of the original Batman phenomenon. Another familiar face from the Batman universe is Lee Meriwether, whose time as Catwoman was brief but memorable. Although Julie Newmar originated the role on television, scheduling conflicts prevented her from appearing in the 1966 theatrical film. Rather than delaying production, the studio cast Lee Meriwether as Catwoman for Batman, the movie. While some fans initially questioned the change, Meriwether brought her own elegance and sophistication to the character, ensuring the film maintained the same playful charm that had made the television series such a sensation. Unlike Julie, Meriwether's association with Catwoman represented only one chapter of a remarkably long career. Following Batman, she became a familiar face on television through major roles in series like Barnaby Jones, The Time Tunnel, and All My Children. She even expanded into voice acting later in life, proving her versatility across multiple generations of entertainment. Although she officially retired from acting several years ago after building a career that included well over 100 screen credits, fans still fondly remember her unique contribution to Batman history. Now 91 years old, Lee Meriwether remains one of the final living connections to the franchise's earliest days, even if her time wearing the catsuit lasted only a single feature film. As the years continue to pass, the original Batman cast grows smaller, yet the legacy they created has only become stronger. Modern audiences may know Batman through darker films and billion-dollar blockbusters, but the colorful world built by Adam West, Burt Ward, Julie Newmar, Lee Meriwether, and their fellow cast members laid the foundation for everything that followed. Their performances proved that comic book heroes could succeed on television, opening the door for generations of superhero stories that continue to dominate popular culture today. And while Gotham has seen countless new faces over the decades, for millions of fans, the original stars will always be the ones who made the city feel truly unforgettable. Julie Newmar's first movie role was more scandalous than anyone realized. Although most people remember Julie Newmar as the irresistible Catwoman who captivated Batman and audiences alike, very few realize that her first attention-grabbing screen appearance was already turning heads years before Gotham ever existed. Long before she became television's ultimate femme fatale, the young actress had taken on a role that was surprisingly bold for the conservative standards of 1950s Hollywood. Looking back today, it's easy to see why it raised eyebrows and why it hinted at the fearless screen presence that would later make her a star. In 1953, Julie, then still using her birth name, Julie Newmar, appeared in the historical adventure film Serpent of the Nile. The movie itself centered on the legendary Egyptian Queen Cleopatra and was made on a modest budget, borrowing elaborate sets that had been left behind from another Hollywood production. While established stars like Rhonda Fleming and Raymond Burr received top billing, few could have predicted that one of the film's most memorable images would come from a young, virtually unknown dancer who appeared for only a brief moment. Julie played an exotic performer known simply as the Gilded Girl. She wasn't given pages of dialogue or a dramatic storyline. Instead, her role depended entirely on visual impact, and it certainly achieved that. Covered almost entirely in shimmering gold body paint and wearing only a matching gold bikini, Julie performed an elaborate dance that immediately caught the audience's attention. By today's standards, the costume might seem relatively tame, but in 1953, it was remarkably daring. Hollywood was operating under the strict production code, which closely monitored what could be shown on screen. Actresses were expected to project elegance and modesty, making Julie's nearly head-to-toe gold-painted appearance unusually provocative for its time. It's one of the reasons the role continues to surprise modern fans. Many assume Julie's image as a glamorous temptress began with Catwoman in the 1960s. In reality, she had already established that mysterious, seductive screen presence more than a decade earlier. Even without speaking much, she demonstrated an extraordinary ability to command attention purely through movement, confidence, and poise. Ironically, Serpent of the Nile wasn't intended to launch Julie's career. The film itself was produced quickly on a tight budget, with director William Castle later joking that while the studio advertised it as 2 years in the making, it had actually been 2 years in the talking and 15 days in the making. Yet despite its modest production, it became an important stepping stone for the young performer quietly building her Hollywood resume. Looking back now, The Gilded Girl feels almost like a preview of the woman Julie Newmar would eventually become. The elegance, confidence, and magnetic allure that later defined Catwoman were already unmistakably present. Most audiences simply didn't know they were witnessing the earliest glimpse of a future television icon. Were you a fan of the Batman series, and who was your favorite character? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Aldo, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.